Did you know that you do not have one single straight bone in your body? Every single bone that you have in your body has some sort of spiral to it. I remember being in one of my movement classes and being handed an actual human bone and being able to see this spiral for myself. It's fascinating because spirals are the language of nature, and they are what we are going to be exploring today in our movement activity of fish arms. So let's give ourselves a more accurate map of our arms before we jump into our activity, okay? So first and foremost, our arms include more than just the appendage that sort of sticks out from our torso, okay? We also include the collarbone and our shoulder blade. They are also part of our arm structure. So the bones that we have in our arm, we have our collarbone, our shoulder blade, we have an upper arm bone, we have two lower arm bones, then we have our wrist and then our hand. And our arm actually has 4 joints. And I think most people would probably think of their arm as having 3 joints, and most people usually think it's sort of in here, and then we have our elbow and our wrist. But we actually have 4 joints. Our first joint is our collarbone, where our collarbone sort of meets up with our breastbone and the rest of our rib cage up here. Then it is where our arm connects to our shoulder. So I think a lot of people think maybe it's a little bit higher, a little bit closer to the neck. That's incorrect. It's right where this upper arm bone locks into that socket, okay? And then it is our elbow joint and then our wrist joint. So as we now have a better understanding and map of our arms, let's dig into our spiral activity of fish arms today. So the spirals that our arms have, we call them pronation and supination, but that also sort of corresponds to our primary and our secondary. So our pronation is going to be primary and our supination is going to be secondary. So the first spiral that we'll talk about is pronation, and this is sort of led by our thumbs. Our arms are going to be spiraling in towards our body. This is going to be pronation and primary, and our thumbs are going to be moving sort of down and then out away from the body as those arms are spiraling in towards the body, okay? This is primary and pronation. And then the opposite of this is then supination and secondary, okay? And this is led by the pinkies. The pinkies are going to drop down and come up and then sort of in and up. And then the arms themselves are going to be spiraling away from the body and sort of out, like we sort of talked about secondary being an extension out into the world. It's the same thing for our arms. They sort of spiral away from our body and then out away from our sides as well. So to do the activity of fish arms, what we're going to do is to start with our arms down to our sides, rotating inwards in primary and pronation. And then we're going to alternate between pronation and supination, primary and secondary, until our arms are over our head in a supination or secondary. And what's interesting to add to your awareness is if you're allowing the rest of you to participate in this primary and secondary movement, to notice if your back is changing as you move between these two activities. This is a great way to find a neutral arm and collarbone shoulder blade relationship. If you find yourself hunched or overly straightened, oscillating between these two spirals can reestablish a healthy balance. So guys, this is a really great way to sort of find a neutral arm, right? If you are working where you generally find yourself hunching, or if you're working where you sort of overly straighten yourself, oscillating between these two spirals, this pronation, supination, primary and secondary, is a great way to find that healthy poise and neutral position of balance between our collarbone and our shoulder blade, so that we're not sort of pulling ourselves into what we think maybe is good posture, and we're not sort of continuing to hunch ourselves as well. This is a great way to connect primary and secondary to sort of reawaken that throughout our back, but it's also a really great way to connect our back and our whole body to the appendages that are our arms, because they play a huge part in what we are able to do in our daily lives and in our activities.